Okay, continuing on with our texture. Now that I'm happy with the shirt, we can move on to the teeth. So I'll just block in where the gums and the teeth are, using again my normal map as a reference, and then I can just put a little bit more detail in. So I've chosen a colour that isn't pure white. It's more on the slightly grey side, so it will appear white, but it's not pure white. So we don't want to have it's best to try and steer away from pure white and pure black. It can bloom in camera when you don't, in game when you don't really intend it to, when it's pure white, and the shadows can appear a little bit too dark when it's pure black. So it's best to steer away from that when you actually are painting your textures, because it'll just multiply on top when it's in game anyway and start to look black and rich in game. So just blocking in where the teeth are at the moment, so just doing a quick outline with my white and then filling it all with the same colour again. Okay, with that done, so the same thing as we did with the pants and everything else, we'll place in a little bit of shadow, so just using a slightly darker grey and just outlining or placing the shadows where the gums would meet on the teeth and between the teeth, just to add a little bit more depth. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the teeth. It's not an area that is a focal point or is seen all that much, or definitely not an area that is paid much attention to in game. So just doing a little bit of quick texturing on the teeth themselves, and not paying as much as I would for, say, for the pants or the rest of her clothing. It's a little hard to see on this image here, but I've also adding just a little bit of yellow to the teeth as well to simulate that plaque or tartar buildup that a lot of people have on their teeth. No matter how much you clean your teeth, they're never going to be pure white unless you've gone to the dentist and had that Hollywood smile put in. But so it's always good to add just a little bit of yellow just for the variation as well in the colour. I'm pretty happy with how that's looking at the moment, so I'm going to just do that, just a little bit more of the yellow, and then I can move on to the tongue. With the tongue again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this area, so I'm just going to put in the shadow and a bit of highlight and maybe a bit of speckling to show, to simulate some of the taste buds on the tongue. Okay, to simulate the speckling, I'm going to pick just one of the preset brushes and just use it like a stamp, just clicking to lay down just a speckling of, just a light speckling on the tongue. Okay, with that done, I'm just going to clean up some of the area here, so just preparing for when I do the eye. I don't think I'll start it just yet, but I'm just going to select the eye here and delete the shadow on it, so that when I am ready I can just start with the eye. Okay, with that done, we can move on to a part that I particularly enjoy, and that's the skin. For the skin, we'll actually be doing this in 3 separate layers. This will help us when we create our shader in UDK in order to create a more realistic shader. So we'll start with what I call what's called the backscattering layer. So this is basically everything that's underneath the skin. So the muscle and the bone and the sinew and all of that kind of stuff that is seen when, well, is easier to see, I suppose, when a light is almost shining on your hand. If you put your hand over a light bulb, you can see how the edges of your fingers go really red, and that's the blood being able to be seen as being illuminated from the light. So we'll do this in 3 different layers. I've just started by creating a deep red layer here, so that'll be the simulating the blood. I've also put it on a mask, so we're going to be doing this as indestructibly as possible, so that if we need to change something, we can go back and we can do it. We can change that at a later date. So I'm using a brush here that is pressure specific, so it is really only going to get the full effect if you have a tablet. You can find any kind of brush to get if you're using a mouse to get a similar effect, but this one I'm using in order to get the texture and the feel of the muscle underneath the body. So you can tell that it is pressure specific because of the little swatch that comes up in the top left hand corner. It basically shows you the tilt and how that brush is. It's simulating an actual brush. So okay, I'm going to start when I paint with the bony areas. So again, using my reference my anatomical reference from Zygote, I'm going to start to paint in the areas where the bone and the muscle are on the arm. So as you can see, I'm just continuing on painting in where the muscles are, using my reference from Zygote Body, and just laying down where the muscle is, and so red where the muscle is, sorry, so I'll probably add a few different shades of red to create the muscle, white where the bony areas are, and I'll probably use a pinkish colour to simulate where the tendons or the sinew joins the bone to the muscle. Okay, don't forget the hand. Although most of our hand is made up of tendons and ligaments, there are some muscles, particularly around the thumb. So everywhere else is a tendon or a ligament. So in our fingers there are actually no muscles, it's all tendons, but there is a muscle on the inside of our thumb there that gives us that opposable thumb. So adding a little bit more depth to the muscle here with a darker colour to thicken up that muscle. Here I'm just adding the colours that I've used so far to my palette so that I can use the same colours again when I create the face. Okay, so I'm starting to paint in the joint, the ligament between the muscle and the bone now, so just a very light pink to simulate this. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with my backscattering layer here at the moment. So now I'm going to create the next layer, which is the subdermis. So this is the layer just underneath our skin, which is the epidermis. Okay, to start that, I'm going to create a new layer, again applying the same mask for the skin area as I did with the rest of them. And I'm going to, actually before I start painting in my subdermis, I'll start putting in the thicker veins that are in the arm. So using my reference image again, I'm just going to go in, this time with a different brush with a pointier tip on it. I'm going to paint in just the really big veins, so the arteries. So just where those big blue ones are in the reference image. Okay, now that I'm happy with that, I'm going back to my subdermis layer that I created, and I'm going to use a pinkish colour to start with. So I'm just going to try, I want to get kind of a speckly effect to overlay this one here. So I'm going to try this brush and see how it goes. So there is a bit of an experimentation when you're creating any kind of texture or paint or image. I'm just trying to very lightly apply a pink coat over the top of all of this backscattering layer, just so I can still see what's underneath. It's not obscuring it completely, but it is putting kind of a base wash over the whole lot. I've also noticed here that there's a bit of an odd artifact that seems to have come up in my texture. It's probably I've put down a brush stroke when I didn't mean to or something. So I'm just going to go in here and try and get rid of that before I move on. Now that I've done that, I'm going to go back with my subdermal layer, and I wasn't really happy with the brush that I was using before, so I'm going to see if I can create one myself. So just using a base as a preset one as a base, I'm going to go in here and change some of the settings. So putting on scattering, trying a dual brush and a transfer, and playing around with some of the settings to see if I can get something that I like. And again, using that pink color, I'm going to go in and dust, make sure that I'll turn my palette off and making sure that I'm on my subdermal layer, I'm going to go over with a very low opacity and flow and try and put this colour over the top of my as a base for my subdermal layer. So it's basically going over all of my all of my muscle, my backscattering layer, and it brings the colours together and puts a base down, basically a wash over the top. So it's the first layer of our subdermis. Okay, so I deleted the layer that I just started with. I wasn't happy with how that was working, and I've recreated it, and so now I'm just going to go in and play around with the brush settings and seeing what I can get in just messing around with some of the settings here. So just putting on shape dynamics so it'll adhere to my pen pressure, trying scattering, putting on a bit of transfer, and just playing with that sort of stuff to see if I can get something that I like. I'll also again bring the opacity and the flow down, and then I'll just go over my backscattering layer to lay down the beginning of my subdermal layer. So again, we're not putting 100% colour over this. We still want some of the backscattering to show through. This is just the first wash of the subdermis to tie everything together. Okay, I think we'll leave that there for now and continue on in the next video.